What's going on, everybody? This is the NFL Experts. I'm not your boy, Mark. Not your boy, and we're not asking you to smash any buttons. But I'm Wayne G. I'm with Mark D. How are things going today?
I'm good, man. How are you, Wayne?
I'm not too shabby. I mean, I could be better. I am a Patriots fan. Mark is a Broncos fan. Both of our teams stink this year. We're going to talk about that towards the end of the show. But we're both suffering long and hard. And obviously, we have some stuff to get to. Before we do get to it, though, I want to make sure people are following us on social media. So like I said, you don't have to smash the subscribe button or any of that jazz. But definitely make sure you're checking us out on social media. We are available on Twitter at NFL Experts Pod, Instagram, NFL Experts Pod, YouTube, NFL Experts Pod, TikTok. If you want to email us, nflexpertspod@gmail.com. Pretty easy to remember. It's not rocket science. It doesn't change. There's no letters or numbers mixed in there. It's just at NFL Experts Pod. So that's where you can find us. And we are going to talk about a couple of things today. First and foremost is going to be the NFL trade deadline. So the NFL trade deadline happened on October 30th. It's not the MLB trade deadline or the NBA trade deadline where lots of big name guys are getting traded. But there's some stuff that happened, and I'm curious to get your thoughts, Mark, on, particularly a couple of pass rushers who the Commanders traded.
Well, first, before I get into that, I want to mention I have kind of a weird stance on the trade deadline. I think that it's way too early in the season. What do you think, Wayne?
Well, they did make it later because it used to be even earlier. I think it was week 4 or something like that was the trade deadline. Maybe it was 6. I can't remember, but now it's like week 8. So they are making it later in the season to try to get some of those teams who are crappy to dump some of their veterans out of the contending teams. But I don't know if it's ever going to be 4 weeks to go.
Like in hockey, they go way late into the season for their trade deadline. Like, I feel like that helps teams more because you really find out where your standings are in the season, like where your players are injured or not, like who players you're going to need. I feel like week 8, that's only halfway through the season, and you don't know what's going to happen the rest of the 8 games. So I don't know. I've always just didn't like that it was so early.
I think it makes it trickier because the NFL is the only one that doesn't have guaranteed contracts. So like if a guy gets traded in the NHL, his new team has to pick up his whole contract. Whereas in the NFL, they could dump him after the end of the season and not have to pay him the rest of his deal because it's not guaranteed. So there's a little bit of kind of nuance there.
Okay. See, I didn't know that. All right. That makes sense.
Yeah. So let me say, so I'll start with Montez Sweat. Obviously, he gets traded from the Commanders to the Bears for a 3rd-round pick. And initially, I didn't like it because I was like, it doesn't make any sense. Why didn't he go to a contender? Why is he going to the Bears? But then they signed him to a 4-year extension. So I felt better about it. Like maybe the Bears are trying to get better one piece at a time, and this was just one piece.
Well, they do have a defensive head coach, Eberflus. So, he's probably looking to bolster that defensive line that they have, or literally the whole team, but definitely the defensive line. So I thought it was a good move, but like with you, also, I'm like you, it didn't make any sense. But maybe it does make sense because maybe they're trying to rebuild because they might be getting the number 1 pick, So
and possibly
they might have a chance of totally restarting their team with Caleb Williams. So maybe it is a good move.
Well, and let me touch on that. I don't like that idea. And I have a friend who's a Chicago Bears fan, Brandon Combs, Beastie Combs. He's on the Man Hour Sports Show, guys. Check that out. They're daily at 10 a.m. But Brandon's a Bears fan. And me and him have had this conversation because he doesn't think they should trade Justin Fields. And I kind of agree. I think Justin Fields is a very good quarterback. But I also think that Justin Fields has to get an extension next year, which is going to be $40 or $50 million a year. And if you get Caleb Williams, he's only making $8 million. So financially, it makes sense to get Caleb Williams, but I think from a team building standpoint, I'd rather build around Justin Fields.
You would? So you think Justin Fields is a better quarterback?
I think he's a better quarterback right now. I don't know if his ceiling is as high, but I think he needs the right coach. And my friend Brandon, he said this too. He said nobody who goes to Chicago is going to be developed as a quarterback. This is their plan. They draft Mitchell Trubisky, right? Then after 1 year, they bring in a new head coach and a new system. Then they draft Justin Fields. They bring in a new head coach and a new system. Now they're going to draft Caleb Williams. Eberflus doesn't get fired. They're going to start bringing in a new quarterback. It's just a revolving cycle. Just build this quarter. Justin Fields is an amazing quarterback. He needs the right system. This isn't the right system. And what Brandon says, and I agree with him, is that someday we're going to see Justin Fields winning a Super Bowl with the Rams or the Falcons, and you're going to be a Bears fan going, man, we had that guy.
Right. I say that a lot about Josh Allen because we could have drafted him. So I understand, man. But yeah, I can totally see your point on that. But like you said, he needs the right offense. I think he needs an offensive coach, not a defensive coach. That'll definitely help him along his journey. So if they could do that, that would be a right step in the right direction.
Well, I think if we'll touch on Josh McDaniels later, but I think if they could go out and get Josh McDaniels to be the offensive coordinator, that'd be leaps and bounds for him.
Okay, no, yeah, he's a definitely good offensive mind, but he's kind of not on anyone's radar right now. you know.
Well, let's talk about the other pass rusher in Washington, and that's Chase Young. Now, Chase Young was the number 2 pick in the draft. Huge promise, just couldn't stay on the field. But when he is on the field, he's very effective. He's already got 5 sacks this
He's a
season.
beast.
He goes to San Francisco for a 2nd and a 5th, I believe. And I love this, not just for him, obviously getting out of Washington, which is a nightmare, but going to San Francisco, where San Francisco actually is one of the top teams in the league in terms of hurries, but they're 22nd in sacks. So what that means is Nick Bosa's chasing the quarterback, and there's nobody on that other side to tackle him when he does. Well, now he's got somebody on the other side. So either you're going to be running from Chase Young or you're going to be running from Nick Bosa.
Oh man, I think like if we have to pick any winners or losers in this whole trade deadline, the Niners won it for sure. You know?
Oh, I mean, they got a monster. Again, it's only a rental because he's going to be a free agent at the end of the season. I don't know if they're going to re-sign him, but I think that it definitely gives that defense, which is already really good, an additional boost kind of heading towards the playoffs.
Right. And the only reason why they let him go is they didn't want to pay him. Like Washington didn't want to pay him. Like I think they wanted to keep him, but they just didn't want to pay him.
Yeah, and I get that. I mean, he can't stay on the field. I mean, why do you want to give a guy $25 million a year or whatever Myles Garrett's getting to like play 8 games a year?
And so I guess with him going to the Niners, it's kind of a prove it for him to if he's going to get a deal there or be somewhere else.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's say, because I don't think San Francisco re-signs him. Let's say he finishes the season how he starts it. And let's say he ends the season with like 11, 12 sacks on the year. Do you think he gets a big contract, and where do you think it comes from?
That's a good question. I don't know. Like whenever I think defense, I think the Ravens. So I'm like, I think putting him on the Ravens, man, that would be lethal.
That's all they do is add pass rushers and linebackers every year.
So that's what my gut says, man. Is I'd say Baltimore.
Okay. And the other trade that I kind of wanted to touch on was the Arizona trade to Minnesota, where they sent Josh Dobbs, basically swapped a 7th and a 6th round pick. And I remember at the time thinking, and I posted this as a meme on our social media at NFL Experts Pod. You can see that kind of stuff. But I posted this meme saying like both teams trying to lose, because my train of thought was obviously Arizona's trying to lose because Dobbs was playing really good, but they get rid of him so they can get that number 1 pick. And then they have, he goes to Minnesota, but I'm like, he's going to have to learn the system. He's going to have to learn the lingo. He's not going to play well there right away. And lo and behold.
And then look what he did.
Yeah, Jaron Hall gets a concussion, and Dobbs comes in and wins the game.
And they were basically saying, this article I read said that Kevin Connolly? Drawing a blank on his name. Their head coach was saying that he had to walk him through every play, like because that's how much he didn't know in the offense. But he's so smart, he picked it up like quick, and they won the game. So crazy, man.
Well, they talk about how he's a rocket scientist. I guess that's what he went to school for. I'm like, so is Matt Patricia, but you didn't want him running your offense, so.
Yeah, so he's super wicked smart, so that's probably why he was able to just like play as well as he did in the pinch. And I can only see him getting better. Like they're another winner. Like their team is hot right now. So for them to get a quarterback that can help them along, maybe get them into this playoff run, that's good for them.
And are there any other trades that happened that you wanted to chat about? I know there were some trades that didn't happen that kind of perplexed you.
I think the Leonard Williams to Seattle was a crazy trade because they're another team like the Ravens. They just bulk up with defensive linemen, and I feel like that was a missing piece that they really needed somebody that can really, because they don't have a big name on the defensive line, so they needed someone that could stop the run, and he was great for the Giants. So, and I bet you they pay him too. I bet you after this deal's done, if he plays well there, I bet you they pay him.
It'll be interesting because he doesn't fit what I think of when I think of a Pete Carroll player, because Pete Carroll traditionally likes really athletic players. And I know that Leonard Williams is a good athlete, but he's also the big kind of run stuffer guy. You think of guys that Pete Carroll drafts, like Jordan Brooks. They're guys who run 4.40s and they're 6'2", and they just get all over the field. Cam Chancellor and Richard Sherman. They're big, long, fast. Leonard Williams doesn't fit that mold, so I'm not sure if he's a long-term
and
guy.
Fast. Mm-hmm.
All right, and I know
maybe he is a rental. Yeah, now that you say that, like I'm thinking of Michael Bennett, and he was very athletic on defensive line. So yeah, he doesn't really fit the mold. So maybe not.
Now you mentioned to me,
but I thought it was a good move for them for at least this year.
Oh, definitely for this year. I think it definitely helps them, especially with San Francisco now getting Chase Young. You got to do something in that NFC West to kind of stay competitive. And the Seahawks just got blown out.
That division is wild, man. Yeah. For sure.
Now, you mentioned when we were talking off the air about a couple of trades that didn't happen, most notably King Henry, right? Derrick Henry did not get traded. There was some talk that he might. I never really thought that
I read that he might have gotten traded to Baltimore, but they didn't want to make the move. Tennessee backed out at the last minute, I think. But there was a deal in place for him to go to Baltimore, which I thought would have been huge for them. That offense and that defense with King Henry, oh, dude. But yes, I think Tennessee just didn't want to let him go.
Well, he's making $17 million a year, so it's not like he's an easy move to somewhere.
Right. They could have brokered the trade though, and maybe paid part of the salary. I don't know, like how all that works, but
I don't know. They do it in baseball.
Yeah. And so another trade I think that didn't happen that I think should have happened was Devontae Adams going somewhere else. He's clearly unhappy in Las Vegas. Now he has to play with a rookie quarterback for the rest of the season. I'm sure he's not too enthused about that. I'm sure this isn't what he envisioned when he went there. He thought he was going to be playing with Derek Carr, and then Derek Carr gets shipped out. So, I feel like just as a player, he needs to be he needs to have a better opportunity. He's like the best wide receiver in the league. He should be playing for the Raiders.
But I'll say he has the same problem as Derrick Henry, which is if you think $17 million is a lot, how about 44? Because that's what he's making, I think, next year or the year after that. And it's a huge number. Now, it's not all guaranteed. I think they can cut him after next year and they don't have to pay him much. But it's still, he's coming with a huge cap number, and you're going to have to renegotiate it.
Well, I think he was one of the people that one of the next topics we're going to talk about, the Jets, they were looking for a wide receiver, and he was one of the ones that they were eyeing. So they were willing to pay that money, so I don't think that was the issue.
Okay. Well, we will get to that section. And by the way, people, if you're watching the show, please feel free to comment on Facebook or YouTube or wherever you're at. Comment. We'll bring the comments up. We'll talk about them, unless it's a spam link, then screw. But, we'll definitely talk about that. Now, nobody's got any comments yet, so we will jump over to the next section. You mentioned the Jets. Let's get to that.
Yeah.
So the New York Jets, like you mentioned, they were looking for another wide receiver. They've got, Garrett Wilson, right, who's great. He's on pace for a 1,000-yard season. And then their number 2 receiver is Tyler Conklin, right? So they don't really have another receiver. They needed to add somebody. There were 3 receivers that their names came up. You mentioned Devontae Adams. I'll have you go in depth on that. And then, of course, Mike Evans, his name's floated around the last couple years of the trade deadline. And T. Higgins, which is another guy that they thought, Cincinnati's not going to pay him, Burrow, Mixon, and Chase. So Higgins was the odd man out. So his name was in there as well. Do you think that one of those 3 is the most realistic option?
I think out of all the 3 of them, I think Evans might have been the most realistic option because he's on the end of his deal. He's on the last year of his deal. He's clearly unhappy in Tampa. I thought that was the one that was going to happen. I thought for sure. I was like, the Jets, they think Rodgers is coming back, which I don't know how that's going to happen. But so maybe, I thought Evans was the one that was going to happen, but it didn't. But that was what my thought was.
Yeah, for sure. And there are definitely, Adams is a great receiver. As you mentioned, he would have been amazing in New York. He'd be the number 1 receiver right away. I don't think Evans would be, although Evans is on pace for a 1,400-yard season this year. And then, of course, T. Higgins, he's he's the second man in Cincinnati, but they also have Boyd. So I like Higgins the most, but he's also at the end of his rookie deal. So no matter who you pick, like you said, Evans is at the end of his deal. Adams is going to have to be renegotiated. No matter which one of the 3 they get, somebody's going to get a huge contract if he goes to New York.
But if you think about it, when you mention Adams actually, now that I'm thinking about it, talking to you, he's probably the best fit because of him and Rodgers. So maybe that's why they were the team that was willing to pay him all the money and willing to do the trade. But I read that because of all the Josh McDaniels stuff, like people like they called the Raiders and nobody was there because of all this stuff that's going on with the team. So like they didn't even really get a chance to like give him an offer for him.
Well, let me ask you this question: is what is the offer for a guy like that? Because you have to remember, Adams went to Vegas for 2 first-round picks. Marquise Brown was traded a couple years ago for a first-round pick. So I would think Higgins would get a first. I think Adams, you're getting a first, maybe a second. I don't think you get the 2 first back, but a first, maybe a second. I think the cheapest is actually Evans. I think you can probably get him for a third or a fourth.
Right. Yeah, so the better deal would have been Evans, but long-term Rodgers, the Jets, would have been Adams.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so and
those just following his boys, seems like.
Yeah, those are the 3 names that popped up. So I mean, I guess that's all we really heard about the Jets. Well, anytime I hate the Jets, so if that's the big news that they make for the week, good for them, I guess.
Well, can we talk a little about the Jets, about this whole Aaron Rodgers thing, about how he's proven this miracle surgery that he's going to come out and he's actually going to play this year? But it's like, why would he come back and play this year when they're playing so terrible? Like, why would he want to come back to that? Like, the whole reason he got hurt is because their offensive line is terrible.
But I think they're still in it. Aren't they 4-4 or something like that? I mean, they're still in.
They're still in, yeah, I guess. But I mean, you got faith in them that they're going to do it? Like, they have the longest playoff streak. I mean, not making the playoff streak is almost as long as my Broncos. So,
well, I would say this. So there's 9 games left. They're 4-4. So they're 500 with Zach Wilson at quarterback. How good are they with Aaron Rodgers over the next 9 games? 6-3. That puts them at 10-7. That's a playoff team.
Yeah. But who knows? Like, they still don't know when he's coming back. He says a couple fortnights, which means like probably 6 weeks. So that's at the end of the year.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
I don't know. Like,
why bother?
But they'd have to have a winning record for him to want to come back, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's not going to come back to a team that's, let's say they go on an 0-5 streak and a 4-9. He's not coming back for the last 4 games of the year to get hurt just so they go 8-9 and still miss.
That's what I mean. So it's like he's doing all this work to like come back, but it's like, why? I don't understand it. He just wants attention, dude. Like, I got to tell you, I don't, like you said, you don't like the Jets. I don't like Rodgers. So
he's definitely a diva, and he's been that way his whole career. And I think he learned from Brett Favre. Favre was the same way, loves the attention.
Yeah, dude, I can't stand it. Like, I'm so over him right now. And so I shouldn't say this, but I kind of laughed when he got hurt, to be honest with you.
It's like discount, double check.
Karma, man. Karma. Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, again, we still don't have any comments. Again, people feel free to chime in. We're going to jump onto the next section here. This is one that's near and dear to my heart. So Josh McDaniels is fired as the Raiders head coach. Now, I think a lot of people thought this was going to happen, but he got a season and a half. Like, what is the NFL coming to now when a guy gets, 18 games, let's say 25 games, and if you don't have a winning record after 25 games, you're out. I mean, remember Bill Belichick went 5-11 and then started 0-2 before Bledsoe got hurt and Brady came in. But like, what are we at now where it's like, all right, you're fired after a bad year? Well, no, he's kind of into the second bad year, but.
Well, let's think about this. Who's the leader at the top for the Raiders?
Mark Davis.
Mark
right?
Davis. And look at the Raiders franchise over the years. They've done this over and over the years. Get a coach, have him for like 2 years. He doesn't work out. Move on to the next. Like last year, the Raiders had Bisaccia, who actually got him into the playoffs, and then they fired him for McDaniels. Like, are you kidding me? Well, I don't know. Like, go ahead.
McDaniels was the big name. He was the big name on the market, that teams were looking at getting. So I understand that. He is actually a head coach candidate the year before. So I think they were probably thinking, hey, let's get this guy. They were thinking he'd be another John Gruden, who John Gruden would still have his job if he hadn't sent some shady emails. So,
right.
He signed a 10-year deal. So really between Gruden and McDaniels, the Raiders are paying like $100 million for 2 coaches to sit out on the bench.
And like I was saying, like they say, success and failure comes from the top. So I'm blaming Mark Davis. I feel like Mark Davis should have never even hired Josh McDaniels as the coach. He should have kept Bisaccia. He had the locker room under him, like willing to like fight for him. And you fire that guy, and then you let go of Carr, which really upsets Adams and their connection. So it's like their whole franchise is in complete disarray. And it doesn't surprise me, dude. I hate the Raiders. I'm a Bronco fan. Everybody should know that that's like our number one rival team. Everybody says it's the Chargers or it's the Chiefs. It's the Raiders. I don't care what anybody says. The Broncos hate the Raiders, and it'll always be like that. And so, therefore, I don't like them, never will. So I laughed at this whole situation, Wayne. Like, to be honest with you, it's like, oh, Raiders doing Raider things.
So, and this topic kind of gets split into two topics. One is McDaniel's future, and the other is the Raiders coaching job a desirable position? Now, they have an interim coach in Pierce. He won his first game, but really I wasn't impressed. So if you're a head coach or you're up for a head coaching job, is the Raiders job an attractive position in your mind?
I'd say yes and no. I'd say yes because they have some key players. Like they have Max Crosby on the edge. They got Adams. I guess you can say Jimmy G's a decent quarterback. So they have some weapons. They have Josh Jacobs. You know, they have some pieces. They just need to build on those pieces. So like if they can get some more key guys, that could be a good roster. But what I would say no to is that they play in the AFC West, which is really, really hard division. You got to play the Chiefs every year. You got to play Herbert every year. It's ridiculous. So so that's the hard part for any coach coming into this division.
Well, I would say no and then no. So just a straight no across the board. And I'll tell you why is because, one, they don't have anything to build on. I mean, Jimmy G is a Band-Aid. He was supposed to be like a stopgap, and then you have another quarterback. He's not going to be the future quarterback of that franchise. So you really don't have a starting quarterback. Aiden O'Connell looked like not that great his first game. So you don't have a quarterback. You don't have a running back because Jacobs is only on the 1-year deal. And so you don't have a running back next year. You don't have an offensive line, and you don't have any defensive players outside of Crosby and Moreg, right? So really, you've got two good players on the defensive side of the ball. You've only got one first-round pick this year. You've only got $60 million in cap space to try to fill out this roster, and you just watched the last coach get canned after a season and a half. Do you want to go coach that team that has no pieces and get a season and a half?
No, you're right. Like now that you say that, you're right. You're right. Josh Jacobs will be gone. And so they basically will just have Adams and Crosby, so that doesn't make a team. So no, I agree with you for sure.
I think the only coach who takes that position is Eric Bieniemy because he's dying to be a head coach. So
I was just going to say, who do you think is going to be the coach? Who's the candidate you think?
I think Bieniemy is the only one that would actually take it. Outside of some special teams coach or somebody like an Aaron Judge, Matt Patricia, right? So people who are like pariahs, it's going to be Bieniemy or somebody like that.
What about John Harbaugh?
Again, why does he want to take that position though? Again, he's going into a failing position. So a good coach.
But he's done that before. Like he did that at San Diego State, did it at Stanford, he did it with the 49ers. Like he built those teams up. And I read somewhere that his first NFL job was with the Raiders.
Yeah, but wouldn't you say that the 49ers, even when he took them over, was a much better situation than the Raiders right now?
Oh man, that was so long ago, and I'd have to remember that. Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough call. I'd have to look back at that roster the year that he took over to see where it was compared to the Raiders. Because I feel like they had some more pieces in San Fran. Like they had Alex Smith, and they had Bowers, and they had their linebacker core. I'm trying to blank on his name, but they had some pieces. I'd have to do some deep research. But I think you're right. I think they were both about the same. Not very good rosters. Not ideal, desirable coaching positions. But I feel like the Raiders is probably worse just because they're the Raiders. Like I said, they've had so many years of disarray. Like I don't see that changing as long as Davis is the owner.
So we agree that the Raiders isn't a super desirable position, and that Bieniemy might get offered the position and take it because he hasn't been highly desired the last couple of years, even though he's gotten some interviews with teams. Let me ask you this: how desirable is Josh McDaniels? If you're an NFL team, and I'm not saying as a head coach, I'm just saying as an NFL team, would you bring him in to be the offensive coordinator?
Well, yeah, I'd definitely bring him in as a coordinator because I was just going to say that he's not a head coach. He's a really good coordinator, but he's not a head coach. As we can see, his stint in Denver lasted a season and a half. His stint in Las Vegas only lasted a year and a half, and then he dipped out on the Colts. You can't forget about the Colts. Like he hired a whole staff, and then he was like, "Nope, I'm not taking the job." Like so. He's not a head coach, but he is a great offensive mind. So I think he could be a great coordinator anywhere. It doesn't matter what team. Like, he'll be good at that.
Yeah, I happen to think that Josh McDaniels is the best offensive mind in the entire NFL. Like, I think he's the best offensive coordinator in the NFL. That's why I say, Chicago, if you got a quarterback like Justin Fields, or a young quarterback anywhere, whatever town you're in, you need an offensive coordinator. He's your guy. I don't care. Jacksonville, I don't know who their offensive coordinator is, but you've got Trevor Lawrence. Bring Josh McDaniels in. He's a great coordinator. Now, obviously, my bias, I want him to go back to the Patriots and get Bill.
I was just going to say that. I was like, he's probably just going back to New England, man. You know that. Come on.
Well, we're going to talk about an option later on in the show about where he could end up based on where Bill Belichick could end up. But wherever Belichick is, McDaniels has a job if he wants it.
Right. Like, because I feel like they're a good pair. Like, one's offensive mind, one's defensive mind. Like they work well together. That's probably why he's always had Josh McDaniels come back.
Not only that, but McDaniels, was the offensive coordinator when Mac Jones had that really great rookie season. And then as soon as McDaniels left, Mac Jones turned to crap.
Yep.
All right. So we're going to jump into the next section. We're going to talk a little bit more about quarterbacks here in just a second. CJ Stroud threw for nearly 500 yards in his game, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, right? It's the most passing yards ever for a rookie quarterback. Obviously, he's been playing great all year. He's got 14 touchdown passes this season to 1 interception. He's been playing phenomenal. I just think that there's a lot of people out there with recency bias who are looking at this 8-game stretch and already anointing him the greatest quarterback in the history.
Right.
Game.
He is playing for the Texans, though, who are absolutely terrible. So, and he's like making them a 500 team, which is really cool. I should mention I'm an Ohio State fan, so go Buckeyes. I watched him every year the year before he was drafted. To be honest with you, man, his play in the NFL has totally surprised me. I did not think that. I thought he was going to be good, but I didn't think he's going to be this good. So I'm not going to be the one that's going to anoint him, but I kind of knew that he was going to be good.
I feel like we still don't know. Like, he's played good, but he's got another whole nother half of the season. And I've always said, like a team that scores 50 points in the first half, they can lose by 50 points in the second half. Because if they can do it, the other team can do it. So if he throws 14 touchdowns and 1 interception in the first half of the season, he could throw 1 touchdown and 14 picks in the second half of the season. And now all of a sudden we're talking about an average quarterback. Here's the topic I really wanted to touch on. Bryce Young versus CJ Stroud. Young was the first overall pick. Stroud was number 2. And my question is, I still think that Carolina made the right decision going with Bryce Young.
You do. See, I don't. I think they have a meddling owner, David Tepper. He just took over as their owner. He's one of those meddling owners like Jerry Jones and Mark Davis, guys who don't know football, but they think they do. And so I think that the owner wanted Bryce Young, but Frank Reich wanted Stroud. And of course, because David Tepper's the owner, he gets what he wants. So in my opinion, I think that the right move for them would have been CJ Stroud because they have a better roster than Houston does.
They do. And when you look at Bryce Young's numbers, they're not bad. He actually completes a higher percentage of passes than Stroud does, and that was his MO at Alabama. He was a very accurate quarterback. Not a huge arm. I think, Stroud has a bigger arm, but Young's thing was that he's a game manager. He's not going to lose the game for you, but he's not going to win the game for you either. He's just a game manager, which you might not think about taking number 1 overall, but I like what he's done so far. He still has more touchdowns than he has interceptions. He's got a 65% completion rate. If it wasn't for the last game that Stroud had, they'd be averaging around the same amount of yards, but again, 500 yards in one game adds a lot to your per game average. But I think that they're pretty comparable other than the touchdowns to interception ratio. And I understand, like you're saying, that Texans have less to work with. But again, I can't fault the Panthers for taking Young number 1. I really feel like that was still a good choice.
No, it was. For me, man, his size just scares me. Like, he's so little. I feel like he's one hit away from being done, Like, he can have all the intelligence in the world, but if he doesn't have the brawn, this is a tough sport, Like, he's got to have some brawn, and he doesn't really have that. He needs to bulk up, if anything.
Yeah, well, again, the same thing could have been said for, Kyler Murray when he came into the league, because Murray was a baseball player, comes into the league, and Murray's pretty stout now. I mean, he's packed on some pounds and he looks like a little bowling ball, So I think, Young could certainly put on 30 pounds or so in the offseason.
Yeah, I think he has to, man. For him to be successful, he's going to need to fill out a bit when he's going to if he's going to take that many hits, because their offensive line isn't great. So until they build that up, he's got to be bigger.
Are you surprised how little? Because they went out, they got DJ Chark, they got Adam Thielen, they signed Miles Sanders. Is it surprising how inefficient their offense has been?
I think it doesn't really surprise me. I think, to be honest with you, I think they're keeping the playbook really simple for him, so he doesn't have to overthink. He can just react. So I feel like because of that, they don't really have a broad offense to work with. So maybe that's why these pieces aren't necessarily showing that they're working. I don't know. That'd be my guess.
Okay. Well, we'll see what happens over the coming weeks here. We've got, again, the whole second half of the season to go. He could turn it around, throw 20 touchdowns in the second half of the season, and just look amazing.
And Carolina is also Frank Reich is relinquishing the play calling to someone else, and so maybe that'll help.
I hate when that happens. It's like like when Mike McCarthy's the head coach, and then the team's not doing well, so he's like, "I'm going to call the plays," or "I'm going to turn the plays over." That's not the problem. The problem is your personnel.
Right. Well, that's what they're trying it, so we'll see how that goes.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about some other quarterbacks here coming up next. Quarterback get benched in the past week or two, and I don't know where you want to start. Obviously, we've got Atlanta, Tennessee.
I'd like to start with Will Levis.
Okay, yeah, let's start with Will Levis. What are your thoughts on
that? He wasn't the one benched, but he was the one that's replacing Tannehill, and he was my favorite quarterback coming out of this year's draft. So I'm really glad that he's actually getting a start. He's got a rocket freaking arm, as you can see from the video. Like now he's got DeAndre Hopkins to throw to, so he's got some weapons there. He's got Henry. They got a decent offensive line, so I feel like they could almost beat the Steelers the other night. So I feel like all I've seen is good. Like, so he's my favorite person in the draft, and so I'm really glad to see him like doing good.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I was surprised, and I'll tell you why. That I didn't like when he got picked. I keep bumping my mouth into this thing. I didn't like when he got picked, only because I'm a big Malik Willis fan. Like I really liked Malik Willis at Liberty. I think he's got a cannon for an arm, and he's extremely mobile. But obviously, they didn't think it was working out, and they went with Will Levis. And I didn't like Levis for a couple reasons. One, he didn't have a high completion percentage when he was in college. I know he played in the SEC, but he turned the ball over too much. I thought he's just a big arm. He's Ryan Leaf. Now, granted, 2 games doesn't tell what he's going to be, but those first 2 games, watching him, not only did he showcase the powerful arm, but his touch was just right on the money.
And also, man, like his just demeanor to the game, like I don't think it doesn't look like he's fazed by the fastness of the NFL, like which most quarterbacks and most players come in the league. They come in the league and it's like the closing time from cornerback to wide receiver is short, so you got to get in that window fast. And I feel like none of that fazed him, and he's ready for it. He's ready for the challenge.
You know what it is? It's the mayonnaise in the coffee. It makes you better quarterback.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that. Isn't that so weird? Like, to each their own, but man, that doesn't sound good to me.
It makes me think of, obviously, you're coming up on the holiday season, and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the claymation show, right?
Yeah.
And it's when they're with Yukon Cornelius, and he's like, this fog is as thick as peanut butter. And I think you mean pea soup. He goes, you eat what you like, and I'll eat what I like. I think, well,
maybe he does it for calories. Have they ever said why he does it? Or he just likes it?
I think he said he tried it once by accident. Like he didn't mean to do it, but it turned out he's like, oh, this is actually pretty good. And so he just kept doing it.
It was so weird, man. So weird. Okay, so some of the other benchings. So Ritter was benched for Heineke. What do you think about that?
I think Ritter makes his way back to the starting position. I think that they invested in him. I think Heineke, to me, hasn't really shown it. Let me take a look here at the stats. So yeah, Heineke, 55.9% completion in the games that he's played. Hasn't really wowed me. I think he's got 2 touchdowns from an interception. He's averaging 222 yards a game. but that completion percentage is a nightmare. And when you look at Desmond Ridder was 65%, so really accurate. So I think that Ritter's going to make his way back to the starting lineup. I don't think that it was a benching over poor play as much as I think there might have been some sort of an injury issue, and I would expect that Heineke might get one more start max, and then he's out.
I can see that. So they just want maybe like a change of pace just to see how the team does with Heineke, I guess. The hot hand, maybe.
Well, I think it could have been, like I said, some sort of an injury issue, whether it's a shoulder or a hand or something. You know how the NFL is. They're cagey. They don't like to talk about players getting hurt and all that. So it could be something they're like, well, it's not super serious, but we don't want to report it to the league. So we're just going to put in Heineke and say he's being benched for, play at whatever reason. And all of a sudden he's going to get better, and then you're going to see him back in the starting lineup. I just don't think Heineke makes it. I don't think he was successful in Washington. He had a couple of good games, but now he's played a couple of games with Atlanta, and they were not good games. So I think that Ridder, being the more accurate passer, is going to eventually get back in there.
Right. And so, and that's another thing that's funny about these QB benchings is that you never know if it's temporary or if they're like going to be the starter going forward. That's one thing I liked about Tennessee. Mike Vrabel basically was like, Levis is the guy going forward. Tannehill is healthy. He's going to be the backup. I love the way that he did that.
You have to. I mean, again, Tannehill has been wildly unpredictable and underperforming since he's been in Tennessee. He had one good year in Tennessee, earned him a huge extension, but I mean, looking at it now, this year, 62% completion, 188 yards a game, 2 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. So for every touchdown he throws 3 picks. And that's just not a way to keep your starting lineup. Now you get a guy who goes in, throws 4 touchdowns, no picks in his first game. I would have announced it after that first game. Like, all right, you're the guy rest of the year.
Right, and they got to see what Will Levis is. He's had a couple good games, but like you said, you never know what's going to happen. So we're going to have to see.
Yeah,
they're in a division that's very winnable. So
yeah, it's a bad. Well, I mean, I think that Jacksonville's going to win that division. I don't think that they have a chance of overtaking Jacksonville. Maybe they get a wild card out of it.
That's what I mean. Like I don't know. I'm not saying they will. I'm just saying that maybe that's what they're looking at is like, hey, maybe we can win some games with Levis and maybe get some steam going and maybe making that playoff run. Maybe that's what they're thinking.
All right.
Even though they were a big seller during the trade deadline, like they traded a bunch of guys.
Well, we talked about the Raiders and Jimmy Garoppolo gets benched and they bring in the Aiden O'Connell, who just looks like trash. And really, Jimmy Garoppolo is the better quarterback. He's another one of those quote-unquote game managers where he's not going to win the game for you, but he's not going to lose it either. He's an accurate passer. Give him those short knockdown, the screen passes, slants, outs. He's not going to wow you with his arm, but he's not going to make a lot of mistakes. I don't think he was benched for poor performance. I think he was benched to say, hey, we're ending everything McDaniels today. And he happens to be part of that McDaniels group.
Yeah, but he's still on the team, though.
Because they gave him a $64 million contract.
So it's like, so you think this is like, so did you hear about the stuff that the whole, like when McDaniels got fired of like kind of how it came to rise to when he finally got fired? He had Antonio Pierce speak to the team like on his behalf. And then Antonio Pierce went on to go on and say that we need to be like the Giants team that I was on. That team could be anyone. And McDaniels didn't like that. And they said that's like a big reason why like this whole thing came to a float and why he got fired.
I don't know.
So yeah, I could see them getting rid of Garoppolo too. Like, yeah, we don't want to deal with that either.
I know that I read a report that Pierce had said something about how the Giants team that beat the 18-0 Patriots in the Super Bowl, how they were a team, and they showed that if you play together like a team, you can beat anybody.
You can beat anyone.
Right. And what that whole thing is. And I guess afterwards, McDaniels, from what I read, said, don't ever talk about the Patriots like that again.
Yeah, and he was just saying that, like, he wasn't even talking bad about the Patriots. He was just saying that, like, that Giants team felt they could beat anyone, and they did beat anyone. They beat the best team ever,
Well, here's because I understand that there's multiple sides to stories, right? And sometimes what gets printed is just what is best for the newspaper or the website or whatnot. And I'm going to say this. So I don't know exactly what Pierce said. And I think it is possible that he brought up the fact that the 18-0 team finished 18-1 instead of 19-0. And I know that that's an extreme.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of a dig for sure.
Extreme sore spot for not only Patriots fans, even Tom Brady doesn't like to talk about that game. Like it's a really.
What
sore
about you?
spot.
Is that sore for you too?
Yeah, I don't. Well, and it's one of those situations where people tried to knock Brady for not being perfect in Super Bowls, like Joe Montana was. That's the kind of knock on LeBron in basketball too. He's like, well, he hasn't won them all. Jordan did. Well, so what? I mean, Montana won 4. Brady's won 7. And he's lost 3. But those 2 to the Giants, actually all 3, the 2 to the Giants, the 1 to the Eagles, he scored the go-ahead touchdown, I think, in every one of those games, and then the defense gave up the winning touchdown. So what more do you want from Brady? Like, he did everything he could, But anyways, and that's that situation.
Since you're a Patriots fan, have you read the new book that's out? It was called "Too Better to Be Feared." Have you heard of it?
I haven't heard of that one. No.
It's a new one. Hold on. Okay. It's a book about the Patriots. It's called "It's Better to Be Feared" by Seth Wickersham. Great read. He mentions in this book about that Super Bowl. I just want to mention it, that they said that part of the reason why they think they lost is because Brady had I forget what it was, some sort of leg injury. I forget exactly what it was. And it was one of those injuries where he didn't disclose it to the NFL. Nobody knew. And basically he wasn't very mobile. So that was part of the reason why he got sacked so much in that game, because he couldn't move around, which I thought was very interesting.
But I still don't put it on that necessarily, because again, that one play, it comes out of David Tyree holding that ball against his helmet and Rodney Harrison's yanking on his arm and it's not coming off. Like, that's just one of those things where it's like, all right, well, the football gods just want it to go this way.
Right. But I just thought that was very interesting that I didn't know that. I was like, huh. So that could have been a contributing. Now, I'm not saying it was the whole reason, but it didn't help him. Yeah,
that's for sure. Let me see if I had any other. The other quarterback thing I wanted to talk about, even though he's not pictured here, Justin Fields. We talked about him earlier. Bagent comes in because Fields got hurt, so he wasn't benched for poor play. He got hurt, and they brought in Bagent. Wins that first. He
played well.
He played for one game. The last 2 games he's been trash. And my question is, now he's going to play one more game, because I guess Eberflus came out and said that Fields isn't playing, but he's not out. He's doubtful, even though he's not going to play. And that was a whole mess, that whole press conference. I don't even want to get too far into it. But the point is, Bagent, there are Chicago fans that wanted him for the rest of the year instead of Fields. And that's bananas to me.
That's crazy, dude. That's way crazy. Yeah. This kid went to West Virginia. Like, come on.
No, I didn't get it at all. It just blew my mind.
No, I don't get that at all either. Like, if that guy does that, if Eberflus does that, he deserves to be fired. Like, for real.
All right. Let's check the comments. Still no comments. Come on, people. Throw your comments in here. Throw your questions in there. We're going to get to the next section. This one I'm definitely going to have a lot to say about. So reports have come out. Obviously, the Patriots are playing horrible. And there's talks, the Kraft family could fire Belichick. But it was like when that came out, and then it was like the next day they reported that in the offseason, Belichick signed an extension to be, again, the highest paid coach in the NFL for however many years. His contract's always a secret. They never disclose it.
They don't. Yeah, but he's the highest paid for sure.
I think he has that in his contract that he has to be the highest paid. And then I don't know how many years they extended him for. But I'm going to play a clip here. This is from Pro Football Talk. This is Mike Florio with his weird conspiracy thought, which has led to many more since then. But let's give a listen to what he has to say, and then I'll get your take.
And what I heard over the weekend from someone I know and someone I trust that made me say, whoa, that's interesting, is the possibility that the end result for the Commanders is a trade with the Patriots for Bill Belichick. And it makes sense when you think about it.
Does it?
Well, for one, why would they want to fire him? Like, I think the whole reason why that article came out about his contract being extended is because I think Belichick wanted that out there to be like, hey man, I'm still the man. Like, I'm not going to get fired, like, so I think that was like his move doing that. And then, but also, like, I don't think Kraft's just going to fire him. I think he knows that he wants to earn the games record over Shula. So, like, for him to be somewhere else to win that record, that would be weird, wouldn't it?
It'd be ridiculous. And you mentioned Kraft. Kraft wouldn't have any banners hanging in his stadium or a 10,000 square foot screen or whatever he's got. He wouldn't have any of that without Bill Belichick. He owes it all to him. So that's why I say, no matter how bad Bill does, he can go 13 this year, 4-13 next year, and still keep his job. Like, Kraft is going to let him coach until he doesn't want to coach anymore, and that's the way it should be. And the idea that you would trade him, that they said that, I think they go on in that Florio interview, he goes on to say that,
a first round pick, right?
Yeah, the Crafts leaked the whole he's on an extension thing so that they could trade him and get some stuff back for him. But I just think that's nonsense. And even though he brought up, Belichick could go to Washington, bring McDaniels, bring Patricia, get the whole crew back together. And I'm like, but Washington sucks. Like, why would Bill want to go through that again? He's got an established thing here.
Yeah, like, and they have a new owner, so nobody knows how Josh, what's his name?
Is it Josh Allen? No, I don't know.
No, the owner for
Josh Harris.
Josh Harris. But who knows what kind of owner he's going to be? Like, Belichick doesn't know this guy. Like, I feel like he trusts Kraft. I don't know. When I heard it, I'm like, for one, why would you want to fire Bill Belichick? Because I guarantee the minute that he gets fired, every NFL team is going to be calling to hire him because he's the best coach, best defensive mind in NFL. So I don't understand that. And then two, it's like, why would you trade him to Washington just so you can get a first round pick? Like, that makes no sense.
Well, here's the thing that blows my mind, and this is that, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, Bill Belichick is still the number one coach in the NFL. There's nobody better. And it's like, why would you get rid of it? Everybody you bring in is going to be a downgrade. If they made every coach in college and the NFL available to the Patriots, anyone they pick is going to be a downgrade over Belichick. So why would you do that?
Right, and like, who are they going to replace him with? Are they going to make Josh McDaniels the coach? What about that?
Well, so I don't think McDaniels, because I think everyone's learned their lesson from giving him a head coaching stint. But I think that, one of the reports that came out, and I'll nip this one in the bud right away, is Mayo, that Gerard Mayo could be the head coach. And I know that they are grooming him to eventually be the head coach.
I know that the Broncos interviewed him last year. I know that.
He's a mini Belichick. So you're going to replace Belichick with Belichick? Like, how's that going to make your team better? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. And I think that Mayo is extremely loyal to Belichick. So if Belichick were to go somewhere else, I think Mayo goes with him.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see I can see what Mark Florio was saying about if Belichick does leave. Yeah, he's going to bring the whole band back together. I bet you. I can see that totally.
The other idea,
but the Commanders, I don't know. I don't know about that.
I'm not sure either. And I think the other idea that was floated around about what could happen post Belichick, and I can't remember who started this one, but again, Florio started this whole landslide. But now we've got people saying that the best case scenarios, because Bill, the coach, as I mentioned, best in the NFL right now, better than Andy Reid, better than anybody. He is the best coach in the NFL. He's a lousy GM. He does a lot of his problems this season are a result of Bill, the GM, screwing over Bill, the coach. With some of his signings.
It's more, dude. It's more Bill Belichick, the GM, on offensive players, not defensive players. Like, the defensive players he's got have all turned out, but the offensive players that he's got have not.
Not even that, because let's take a look. I mean, we got a second round pick for Razai Dowling, who lasted a season. We got a first round pick on Dominique Easley, who was traded after a year or two. We've got a second round pick on, Jesus, what was the guy from Stanford, the safety? I can't remember his name, but Bill's problem is that he drafts, regardless of offense or defense, Bill drafts guys who are supposed to go in the fourth round in the first or second round. Because
right.
And he's really good at drafting guys in rounds 4 through 7. So what he needs is somebody to take away those first 3 rounds, let somebody else pick those for him, and then he can have rounds 4 through 7.
And maybe that's not a good decision if Washington was to trade for him, because he's just going to be a bad GM for them too. And
that's the thing, is that why would he go somewhere and not be the GM? That's what he is here in New England. I said that here's what I think could happen. Well, first I'll go to the other scenario I was going to bring up. The other scenario was that Vrabel comes in as the head coach because he's sucking in Tennessee right now, but he's a Patriots Hall of Famer. Like, he's in the ring of Hall of Fame or whatever. So you bring in Vrabel to be the head coach, and you go get Nick Caserio from Houston to be the GM. And I'm like,
that's interesting.
Well,
I can see that.
Caserio and Vrabel are both Belichick guys. So again, you're just throwing gasoline on the fire, thinking it's going to put the fire out. Like, you're bringing in Belichick disciples to replace Belichick. What sort of result are you looking for?
I don't know. Like, I think this is all just people to get clicks, man, to be honest with you. Like, I don't think there's anything to it. He's not going to get fired. If, like you said, he's going to coach until as long as he wants to, and he's not going to want to go to Washington. He wants to stay in New England. But I will admit, he's said some funny stuff recently. Like, last press conference, he said, what was it exactly? He's like, oh, I can only control what I can control, and I'm focused on the Colts. And he's never really said that line before, which really made me think, like, well, maybe it's different this time.
If he were to go anywhere, and again, if we're playing this crazy game, which I hate playing it, but if he were to go anywhere, he loves the New York Giants. He loves.
That was what I was going to say.
Yeah, and they have been really bad this year. And so again, if you're the Giants and you've got Bill, who loves the organization, who got 2 Super Bowls for that organization as a defensive coordinator, and you can bring him back as the head coach. And again, he brings McDaniels and Patricia and Mayo and all those guys with him. I mean, yeah, if I'm New York, I do that all day long. I
can totally see that. And they could keep Dable there too, because he's already there. He was one of their guys too.
Yeah, he could be a special teams coach. So the one scenario that I said I would like to see, because I said Belichick has struggled as the general manager, I would like to see Belichick be told, you have to give up the general manager position. We're going to bring in somebody. They're going to draft. You coach the team. We think you're great at it. You coach the team, but we're bringing in somebody else to do personnel. I don't know if his ego would allow him to do that. I think it would have to be an established GM. They couldn't go get somebody else's like head of scouting. It would have to be like an established GM that they bring in, like the Chiefs GM. They bring him in. I think Bill would say, okay, that's fine. But otherwise, no, I think he'd be like, no, I'm the GM.
And you got to think, if you think about it, he's really one of the only coaches in the league that's like that still. Like, I remember the Broncos had Mike Shanahan. He was one of those coaches. He was a GM along with being a coach and everything else. Like, I feel like sometimes they probably get spread too thin because they're trying to do too many things at once.
Yeah, exactly. And they're trying to fit guys into a system. I don't know. But anyways, let's get away from the nonsense to get some really good talk here. You and I both have some power rankings, so let's get into that here. All right, so there's 2 types of power ratings and power rankings, and I know that you have yours, which is the traditional style of power rankings. So you kind of look at the NFL, you look at how teams are doing, and then you use your best judgment to put them in order of how strong you think they're doing. I use more of a mathematical formula, and we'll get into that. So let's put yours up first, and let's talk about your top 10. So we've got here the Ravens, Chiefs, Bengals, Eagles, 49ers, Jaguars, Lions, Cowboys, Seahawks, Chargers. I'm going to be honest with you, and that I didn't quite understand the Bengals at 3.
Okay, I knew you were going to say that. Okay, like granted. Okay, so they're 4-3, right? Right.
I think they're 4-4. They might be 5-3 actually.
5-3. Okay, so they recently, like, I'm going like what you said earlier. Like, a lot of these power rankings are recency biased because you got to kind of go off the last week you just watched, like who you think is playing hot right now. And I think the Bengals, like, they're the one team that can beat Buffalo. They're the one team that could beat Kansas City. So I feel like they're dangerous right now, and that's why I put them at 3.
Well, and I think that the danger in opinion-based power rankings is that kind of predictive mentality. Like, all right, I'm putting these guys here because of what they could do down the road rather than what they have done up until now. Because I do agree with you. Like, when I was going through my power rankings, which we'll touch on in a second, when you look at the Bengals, their defense gets a lot of turnovers. Their defense gets them the ball a lot, which is good. And Joe Burrow, I still think, is a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. He had a rough start to the season, but he's starting to come around. And so this is a team that I said, even though they'd started off 2-3 or something like that, I was like, they could finish 13-4. That's how good they are.
They're in a really tough division, though, for sure.
They are, and we talked about the Ravens being number 1, right? I mean, you have them there in the first place. The thing that surprised me, and you've got the Seahawks on there too. The Seahawks just got pummeled. Where are the Browns? The Browns have one of the best defenses in the NFL, and Deshaun Watson just came back. It's
like you said, like, it's predictive, like you said. And I just don't think the Browns are gonna. They've never shown me over all the many years I've watched football that they're gonna do this. And what makes this year different?
Deshaun Watson.
No, no. That guy doesn't even want to play football, I don't think. Like, I think he got his deal, his guaranteed money, and then all this icky situation behind him. I don't know, man. I don't have faith in the Browns, so that's why they're not in my top 10.
So Deshaun Watson, before all the whole massage thing and all that jazz, this is the guy who was completing close to 70% of his passes. He was throwing for 5,000 yards on a team that was going 4-12, thanks to Bill O'Brien, why I wouldn't want him to be the head coach in New England. But, Deshaun Watson, to me, was a top 5 quarterback in the league. He comes back. He has to sit out a year or more, actually more than a year.
Basically, it was like 2 years that he didn't play.
Essentially, yeah. And then he comes back. He's a little bit rusty, right? He played, I think, the last 4 or 5 games, whatever it was last year. He didn't really look great, but he was starting to shake the rust off. He won last week. And like I said, this is a team with Myles Garrett, who's the best defensive player in the NFL. I don't think that's even up for debate. And it's a team that's only allowing like 220 yards total for any team that they play against. Like, that's bananas, And so you bring that defense and you give them a legit top 5 quarterback, even if you think he's slipped to like 8th or 9th, like that's a team that's going to win 13 games.
They got to prove it to me, man. I just don't think they are. I don't think they are going to win it. I think they're about to go on a skid.
I don't know. See, you're blowing my mind here because you just went Deshaun Watson. I don't know, man, but Geno Smith, heck yeah.
Well, I'm not saying Geno Smith. I think I got more faith in Pete Carroll, man.
All right. So, like I said, that's kind of how opinion-based power rankings work, and they're all like that. Sports Illustrated, ESPN, doesn't matter where you go. No matter how much of an expert somebody is, they're putting together the power rankings based on what they see. So it's subjective. Now, What I did is I said, I want to put together a mathematical formula that cuts through all opinion. My opinion is not in these power rankings, only numbers. And what I did is I took teams and how they competed against their schedule, like strength of schedule. And I know I explained this before the show, but just for those of you listening now, what I did basically is, let's say you take the Eagles and the Patriots. That was a 25-20 week 1 matchup. Well, the Patriots now are averaging 15 points per game, and they scored 20 against the Eagles. So the Eagles are at a -5 right off the bat in a win. They're in negative points in a win because they're allowing a team that's bad to score on them, to get yards on them, and they're turning the ball over to that Patriots team that doesn't get a lot of turnovers. That all hurts them. And that's hurt the Eagles all season long. They've been playing average against bad teams. So let's take a look at my power rankings. This is math. You'll see some numbers here. We got the Ravens. They're also at number 1. Then we have 49ers, Jaguars, Cowboys, Lions, Eagles at 6, Chiefs, Browns at 8, Texans, Saints, Dolphins at 11. People aren't going to like that. Bengals at 12. We get into the Chargers, Colts. And we get to some of the negative numbers. Obviously, we can see, the Bears are horrible. The Giants are horrible. The Broncos and the Patriots, unfortunately, they're horrible. -200 for both of those teams. But 289. I mean, where do we see some of the problems with this list here?
I don't see any problems with it. I see, I think your math is on point. But I see my Seahawks that I mentioned are in the negative, which I can see. But they're winning games still, though.
Well, aren't they like 500 or barely over 500? There may be one game over 500, right?
Yeah, I think they're 5-4.
So they're another team that's the reason they have negative points is because those wins are against bad teams and they're not hitting those points. And then their wins are against bad teams. And again, they're still not hitting the point. So when I was going through and I was trying to look at the per games for these teams, this is their average per game for points. There were some games, especially with the Eagles, the Seahawks, where you'll see they'll win 20-12. And you go, oh, it's a 20-12 win for the Seahawks. But they got negative 87 points for that game. Because they were playing a crappy team and they got less yards than that team allows. They scored less points than that team allows. And so that's going to come out to hurt them. Whereas a team that scores a lot, like I know I took a lot of grief where the Cowboys were number 1 last week. Now they've dropped down to 4th. They're at 193.63. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're beating the crap out of people. And the reason the 49ers are up there despite losing 3 in a row is because I don't have any recency bias in numbers. It's just they beat the Cowboys 42-10, and the Cowboys are one of the top teams in the league.
I like it, man. It takes all the opinion out of it completely. You can't really debate it. I can't debate it, dude. It's all numbers,
Absolutely. So, all right, so we got some comments rolling in. Man Hour Buck. Finally, we got some comments. Thank you, guys. Let's see. Man Hour Buck says the Bengals are still overrated. Again, they don't belong at 3, but I do think that they're coming back around. He does mention here, Deshaun Watson is getting better. I agree. I think Deshaun Watson is getting back to form. That's why I like the Browns there. He does say, he got hurt early and he's getting better and better each week. Watch them, my dude. Will do for sure. I really appreciate all the comments here, Buck. Ford is getting better and better each week. Cooper is looking like prime Cooper. Browns are going to win the North. Okay, but now we're getting
over the Ravens.
No, we're getting a little crazy.
No way.
You know how people get really excited?
Yeah, come on, dude.
They just start saying stuff. It's like, hey, we're gonna win.
Come on, dude.
We're gonna win the next game. Yeah, we're gonna win the next 3 games. Yeah, we're gonna go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Right.
Let's see. Where do the Browns skid? Ravens, Steelers, Broncos. Well, obviously the Broncos will be an easy win. We know that. The Steelers could lose to the Steelers. The Browns could lose that game. The Steelers play somewhat decent defense. The Ravens are definitely going to beat the crap out of the Browns.
Well, dude, those division games are always a wild card. You never know what's going to happen.
That's not an easy slate of games, Buck. So I do think the Ravens look really good. And here's my thing with the Ravens. And I skipped my overlay because I got all excited. My issue with the Ravens, I've been a Lamar Jackson fan since he was a rookie, since before he was a rookie. And when the Patriots were drafting and they took Sony Michel and Isaiah Wynn, I was like, they should have taken Lamar Jackson in that draft. And
I remember. Yep.
He is such a good passer. And I know he can run. And I'm not saying he's a great runner, but he's such a good passer. And I felt like he wasn't running because that's his inclination. He was running because if you watch those games, those were designed quarterback runs. I thought the Ravens were misusing him up until this year. And he almost did go to the Patriots in the offseason. The only reason he went back to the Raiders is because they went out and got OBJ and they drafted Zay Flowers and they said, listen, we're going to turn this into a spread passing offense for you so that you don't have to run. And look at him now. Best team in the NFL.
Yep. And they also have a new offensive coordinator that came from Georgia, who are the best team in college football. So that definitely helps.
So yeah, that's definitely a team we like. Again, supercomputer rankings, they never lie. It's math. And I did say this to Buck off the air. I said that, the problem with numbers is that they do cut through opinion. They also cut out context, right? So if 3 of those games against bad teams were only because that team's starting quarterback was hurt and now he's back healthy, then it's kind of an unfair mathematical thing. It doesn't take that into account. It's just looking at straight numbers. Right.
See, I didn't even think about that. So yeah.
All right, now we're going to get into our final segment of the show here. We're calling this, we haven't decided what to call it. What did you want to call it again, you said?
I was thinking Sunday Discourse because I feel like that's how I feel every Sunday when I watch the team. So I don't know, man.
For sure, yeah, Sunday Discourse sounds much better. I was thinking like the Homer Corner or something like that.
I don't know. I just didn't want it to be so Homerish. I was like, I'm discourse about this, so maybe that's what it could be. I don't know.
All right. Well, we'll do it like this because this is kind of like, in Around the Horn, when they give you the final word, right? This is kind of like our final word, I guess, on the show. Talk to me about your Broncos. What do you want to say about the Broncos?
All right. So they're doing to me like they do every year, which is they're getting my hopes up. So they've beaten the Chiefs. They beat the Packers. They've kind of gone on a run. Our defense is finally turning it around. So they're getting my hopes up thinking that they're going to make the playoffs or even make a run at the playoffs, which I know in my heart of hearts that that's not going to happen, but they get my hopes up every year thinking, oh, they're playing really good right now. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, if they beat Buffalo, hey, we're on a streak. Like we might be able to do this. And I guarantee you they're going to skid against the Bills and my hopes are going to be crushed like they are most Sundays.
Well, we just talked about not wanting to sound Homerish, and you're talking about the Broncos making the playoffs right after we gave Buck crap about the Browns winning the NFC North. I think this is as much a long shot.
Right. Anything can happen, I guess. But I mean, like I said, they're just getting my hopes up. I'm like thinking, hey, we beat the Chiefs, like we might be able to beat the Chargers twice, we'll beat the Raiders again. I don't know. It's just, they just get my hopes up, but I know we're going to get crushed by Josh in Buffalo.
Well, anything can happen with this team. I think Russell Wilson is playing really well. I told you this before we started, that I think he's having an actually decent season. He's getting a lot of flack. Their defense has been absolutely atrocious. I mean, they gave up 800 yards to the Dolphins. That's why they're so low in the power rankings here. But the reality is that if their defense can start quasi-stopping people, then yeah, they got a chance to go on a little bit of a win streak.
I think that's like the Broncos' bread and butter has always been the defense. So I'm really glad that that's turning around because I'm like, that's what I've always known, even though we've been really terrible these last few years. At least we've had like solid defenses all those years. So for us to give up 70 against Miami crushed me. I was like, that's like the only thing we had left was our defense. And now they just get crushed. It was a really sad game.
Well, here's where I'm going to show my homerness. I like to think that I'm pretty level-headed, but before the season started, I said that the Patriots were going to go 13-4 and win the AFC East, and that does not look like it's going to happen now. And what the reason being is that I really like their defense a lot. And obviously they went out and they got Christian Gonzalez. And I said, you look at Bill Belichick and what he did for Malcolm Butler, all-pro first team from undrafted. J.C. Jackson, all-pro first team from undrafted. And now you're giving him somebody with Gonzalez's talent? Are you kidding me? Like, this guy's going to be one of the greatest. He's going to be the next Deion Sanders, you know? And then he gets hurt, unfortunately. So now he's out, but he is going to come back at some point, maybe next year. Judon's going to get better, and he's going to come back. They didn't trade Uche at the trade deadline. And I think that that's telling because, well, for one, he's having a down year, so they probably weren't getting the offers they were looking for. But I do think that they re-signed him in the offseason. The Patriots, I think, have the third most cap space in the offseason. And so I think that Uche is going to get a large contract extension. Judon, I think that Keon White is going to be a monster on the defensive line. They're going to bring back Gonzalez, keep Jackson maybe, Jonathan Jones, Jack Jones. This is a defense that is still like a top 5 defense in the NFL right now, as bad as they are. They're a top 5 defense. They just need a quarterback who can see the colors of the jerseys and can tell the difference between light and dark. Because if they had that, they would be such a good team. So for the first time in my life, I am rooting for the Patriots to lose every game this season because I want Caleb Williams or Michael Penix. Those are my top 2. I want Michael Penix more because that means that they're drafting like 6th and they can win a few more games. But they get Michael Penix, beef up that offensive line, spend that $100 million in cap space they have in the offseason. This is a team that could come back and be the best team in the NFL next year because they've already got a top-tier defense.
But then again, you got Bill, the GM, who doesn't make good picks. So you got to hope he makes good picks.
And that's another, I have to defend it before we get off. I have to defend the N'Keal Harry pick.
Oh, God.
I defend it all the time on Facebook. It was a good pick. That's what I'm saying. It wasn't even an okay pick. That was a good pick to pick N'Keal Harry. It didn't work out. That happens with picks sometimes. It's a good pick. It just doesn't work out. N'Keal Harry, 6'4", runs a 4.40, 40-inch vertical, could high point the ball better than anyone in the draft, including A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel, and DK Metcalf, right? It's just it didn't work out because the Patriots playbook is so complex. It's hard for wide receivers to understand it. That's why guys like Jacoby Myers, former quarterback, Julian Edelman, former quarterback, they do well because they're quarterbacks. You have to be a quarterback to understand the playbook as a receiver. So as much as people like to trash that N'Keal Harry pick, if Bill had drafted DK Metcalf or A.J. Brown, they might have been bust too, and N'Keal Harry would be the superstar in Philadelphia. You know, it just happened that he went to a system they couldn't learn, and most receivers can't.
That is true, because I remember when Ocho Cinco went there, he had a lot of trouble with the playbook, if I remember right.
Reggie Wayne quit after a week of practice. He's like, I don't like not having fun.
Right. Yeah, no, I can see that.
All right. Well, that is our take. I do appreciate Man Hour Buck chiming in. Definitely tune into the Man Hour. That's 10 a.m. Monday through Friday. Buck, Combs, Hoffy, they're great. This was our first show. We're only going to get better, and I thought this was a pretty kick-ass show, if I'm being honest. So imagine it getting even better than this. We're going to get some more reels, clips out there so that people can see it. Buck was the only one that commented. I'm telling you guys, if you're listening on Spotify or you're watching this on YouTube, tune in. We're going to do these every Wednesday night. I know it's Thursday. Surgery kind of cut into yesterday, but we're going to be doing this Wednesday nights at 7, and I think that we put on as good a product as any ESPN or CBS show.
I agree. I concur.
All right. So that is our show. Thank you so much, everybody who tuned in and for all the comments and for watching the show. Please feel free to message us. Follow us on social media at NFL Experts Pod or email us NFLExpertsPod@gmail.com. We will talk about whatever it is you want to talk about, unless, like I said, it's spam. But if you want to talk about something NFL, even if it's not on our agenda, if you take the time to follow and message us, we're going to talk about it. I promise you.
Definitely.